Welcome everyone to the latest edition of our Switching Sectors series. I'm very happy today to be joined by Gareth Rhys-Williams, who was Government Chief Commercial Officer and now Chair for National Highways. Thank you for joining me today, Gareth.
No, delighted to be here.
If you could kick us off, Gareth, by just giving us a high-level overview of your sort of career journey to date, please.
Well, it's career journey or random walk. So I'm an engineer by training. I spent my early career running engineering businesses. I ended up running with 4 CEO roles, a couple in private equity land and a couple of PLCs. And then I joined the civil service in 2016, which was a really interesting time to join.
So you moved to the role of GCCO in 2016, as you say, from PHS, where you were CEO. It could be said that politics is in your sort of DNA. Was it in your career plan at some point to make a move into the civil service?
No, not really. I think what you're getting at, my dad worked most of his life for ICI and then was an MP for 20 years. And then my mum worked pretty much all her life in the health service. So there's always been all this industry CEO stuff's all very nice, Gareth, but when are you going to do anything useful?
And what was it particularly about the role of GCCO that attracted you to it?
Different companies I'd run over the years had sold stuff into government, not in a huge way, but a little bit. And I'd seen the ups and downs of working with government. And I still think, it's in everyone's interest for government to be efficient and work, well with its supply chain. And I thought I could add some value to that and help leverage some of my industrial experience.
You were GCCO for about 8.5 years in the end. Reflecting on that time, what would you say were your key achievements?
What we've built is a function. So those of you who are listening who work in large companies be entirely used to the idea of functions that run sideways across a company, whereas you have verticals of maybe their divisions, line of business, maybe they are regions, and then you have functions to drive professionalism, drive standards, drive commonality, drive best practice across the company. And everyone will have a finance function, an HR function, a bank could have a compliance function, Unilever, a very strong marketing function, Rolls-Royce, very strong engineering function, But this was a new idea for the civil service, where previously departments were pretty much, left to themselves. And that led to a number of issues of, lack of career progression for specialists, lack of sharing of best practice, or indeed sharing of bad practice to try and avoid doing it again between different government entities. And so one of the things I'm proudest about is we've built a function that interacts with itself, shares best practice, benchmarks itself, is driving continuous improvement. And that's really what a function is all about. And we've managed to recruit, a lot of really good people into that, and we've trained ourselves to be better. And so I think my main legacy is the people and how they're organized and work together to drive the performance of the whole. But we've done some amazing policy interventions, which I hadn't expected, which was not at all on my radar when I joined.
And when you started in the role, was there a defined sort of blueprint or vision for what the commercial function could be? Or was it in your sort of gift? Were you given a sort of series of problem statements to sort of tackle? What did you find when you joined?
There was no plan. He recruited me and said, right, get going. There were some obvious problem issues, with individual contracts that were lying around on day one that needed to be solved. But I think what we've been successful at is unpicking the reasons that, the causes behind those symptoms and fixing those. So I think it's fair to say anyone thinking about joining the public sector now, there is dramatically better induction and scene setting for incumbents. I know within the commercial function, we take that really seriously. Everyone gets a buddy, so they've got someone out of their line management to talk to. And we really spend a lot of time on that, and therefore lose very, very few people who join and go, oh gosh, this wasn't what I expected. But I think it's fair to say when I joined that most of that wasn't in place. So it was, jumping into the pool, not sure if it's a pool or an ocean or a sandpit.
How did the political overlay impact on your role as a leader in the civil service?
What I was trying to do, what other functional leaders are trying to do, is just make the place more efficient, work better. It's for politicians, for ministers to decide what happens. I and others were just trying to get the how to be slick and efficient and in line with commonly recognised best practice. So to be honest, for the first 2 or 3 years, I was just left alone. It was only when Caroline went bang that politicians started to see that what we were doing was actually, quite useful on a wider on a wider scale. And we did manage to get a number of policy initiatives pushed through as a result of that. The prompt payment code, prompt payment exclusion. Government now won't buy from companies who aren't paying their supply chain properly and in a timely way. And I think that's had a huge effect on the wider economy. So politicians are interested in things like that. And increasingly, politicians are also interested in the civil service machine working efficiently. So if you're able to come up with good ideas on how this could be done better, faster, less likelihood of going wrong, then the relevant minister will be really interested in that.
And you've touched on Carillion there, and you were GCCO through some quite major political and global events, I would say. And the reality is that in a high-profile role such as GCCO, there is the potential for sort of reputational risk. How do you maintain your levels of resilience during those sort of high-pressure moments?
It's a big question, and the more senior a role you take on in the private sector as well, the more you've got to expect slings and arrows. What is different in the public sector that folks should be aware of is that civil servants don't have a right of reply. If a company that I was running, if a journalist wrote something that was incorrect, you write to them, write to the editor, it would be retracted, whatever. Or you could meet the journalist, have a debate, explain your point of view. That's not the case in the civil service. That's a space rightly reserved to ministers and politicians. And so you get a lot of incoming, a lot of it not correct, that you have no real ability to deal with, unless ministers or the head of the civil service, and it is with him to let you do that. And generally, that you don't have the right to reply. So you have to develop quite a thick skin. Or as a now retired head of communications said to me, Gareth, if you're watching Newsnight, you need to know it's only you and 6 other people, which I think is a little bit unfair on the Newsnight team, who do an excellent job if they're listening to this. A certain sense of humour, a gallows sense of humour, and try and set it right. One of the things that still piques me is the coverage on PPE procurement, which frankly is just miles off the case. Even the NAO, the National Audit Office, said that politicians or ministers weren't involved in contract awards or contract management. But that got drowned out in a very exciting political narrative, and there are lots of lawsuits. I think our hit rate on the lawsuits was 93% or something.
Yeah.
So wins. Or cases being dismissed. So you have to, deal with those slowly, but you do need a thick skin and a certain sense of humour.
And was that a learning curve for you over the 8.5 years, in terms of how you sort of managed that frustration, I guess?
It is a difficult place to get to work. It's got its own rules, and you have to learn those rules, and then learn to work within them. I think, the public sector rightly has a lot of scrutiny from the National Audit Office, from the House of Parliament. This is taxpayers' money. I mean, in the commercial space, we spend over £300 billion of taxpayers' money a year. It's absolutely right. People are able to ask questions about whether we're doing that effectively and in a non-corrupt way. And I would say we are, but it is a totally fair question, and we should expect it.
Yeah.
It's a third of tax take.
Yeah.
So absolutely a fair subject for people to scratch at.
Changing tack slightly, I obviously know perhaps more than anyone that building commercial capability was a key focus of yours as GCCO. When you started in the role, was talent attraction high on the list for you and an obvious priority for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, a function is about getting the right number of the right people in the right place, properly trained, and working together to drive continuous improvement. If you don't have the right people, that machine's not, that engine's not going to work. And part of the problem with the previously very siloed way the government worked was there was an insufficient career path, and so good people didn't want to stay. The public sector will always pay less than the private sector. I think in the commercial space, as you know, there's a slightly special deal we've carved out that makes us more attractive than most. But I think most people are attracted into the civil service by the chance to do things and make a huge difference. And in the commercial space, speaking sort of selfishly of the area I used to work in, you can absolutely make a vast difference working with some outstanding colleagues. And yes, if you come in for 4 or 5 years and then jump back out into the private sector, you will have been handling budgets 10x what you were previously. And if that means you can jump back in and skip a few rungs in the ladder, well, good on you. And that's great for you. That's great for the public sector.
And part of that sort of overarching objective of improving commercial capability, how important was it for you to build a senior commercial team that included expertise from the private sector?
Well, it's a mistake in the public sector to think and it's certainly a mistake to say, even if you do think it, and you'd be wrong to think it, that all answers flow from the private sector.
Yeah.
But in the commercial space, there is a lot of good practice there. And we needed to turbocharge what we were doing. And so, yes, I think the senior 1,500 or so commercial people in central government, I think we've recruited over the years about just over 900 people. Now some have rotated out and some have gone to other roles in the civil service. So, that's been quite a large infusion. And they bring with, great skills, but there is enough good practice within the public sector, that you might want good people. And I think it's good that there's the public sector and private sector are porous. There's lots to learn from both sides. But there's certainly masses of good practice within the public sector that if you benchmark it and then promulgate the good practice, then you can achieve amazing things, which I think we've proven.
Yeah, just developing that point a bit further. What, in your view, can the civil service learn from the commercial world and vice versa?
Compared to the private sector, we are much more timid about proactive management of contracts. And that doesn't imply that things are wrong or going to go wrong. But if you don't manage a contract, then guess what? Things will drift away, and for no ill will on either side. But you if you are spending your own money on extending your house or rebuilding bits of your house, you would manage that every night you got home. You'd talk with the contractor.
Sure.
So I think there's a sort of a default learning there that the public sector has yet to grasp.
Turning things back to you and your decision to leave the civil service and your role as GCCO, what was your thought process on timing?
So I signed on for 3 years and I ended up doing eight and a half. So, okay, that either shows how slowly I work or the scale of things we've done or a mixture of the two or something. The last big thing I really wanted to get done was the new Procurement Act.
Yeah.
So this is reshaping the rules by which everybody in the country that works in the public sector will buy stuff. And I wanted to get that done because it's a huge piece of work. It wasn't me doing it, but I wanted to make sure that I could oversee that and get that on the statute books. And that goes live in October. And so I wanted to stay for that. But also I wanted to get back into back into industry.
Yeah.
I'd like to find other chair roles, other NED roles, that sort of thing. That's where I spent most of my career, and I need to get started on that. Otherwise, I'll miss that window. 8.5 years. That's probably enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel, and I'm sure you would echo this, that being in government for some kind of key moments feels like a great privilege. Are there any points that you look back on, any sort of moments in time that you look back on as being particularly surreal, or particular moments that you will always remember?
Oh gosh, yeah, millions. Your privilege point is a really good one. That prompt payment exclusion we talked about, or we've done similar on net zero. The government won't allow bids on large contracts from companies without a net zero policy.
Yeah.
Well, that's a huge thing. We've got, I can't remember, 3,000 or so extra vendors who've signed up now and have got a net zero policy on their website and are following it. So you have the opportunity to make countrywide changes, and that is an enormous privilege and needs to be taken really very seriously. And so that is fantastic. But it is government. I can't tell you that it is a bureaucracy-free zone, and you do get some slightly bizarre moments where you think, hang on, I need to pinch myself. I'm not really hearing this. And that's sort of, that sort of goes with the territory. There's sort of, there is oversight because some of the decisions you're taking involve tens or hundreds of billions of pounds. And so you shouldn't take those decisions as lightly or as fast as you would in a company where, if you go wrong, which I'm sure it wouldn't, all that's gone wrong is one company. Here, if you make a mistake like that, you can really cause problems. So, you get some surreal discussions.
When you reflect on your time, what are you most proud of?
Well, I have a strong interest in the environment. So actually, that net zero exclusion, I think, if we can get a few other countries to follow it, is world changing, actually, because it's really working in the UK. I think the team that everyone's built up, you were a big part of that when you were in Whitehall. There's a group of people who work together instinctively on best practice projects, making themselves better and better and better without me as notionally in charge of it, knowing what was going on. That's a sure sign that there's just a continuous improvement flywheel that will just mean that we get better and better and better at what the team does, which is good because it's 300 billion quid, and it matters that is those people. So that's the people, obviously, are always the best thing.
And what will you miss?
Yeah, all the people.
Yeah.
Some great people, great individuals. Everyone in the public sector has got a backstory that if you unpick it, you find extraordinary things. And they're not doing these roles for the money. They're doing them because they want to, because it's useful, adds value. But this is an extraordinary group of people, and a privilege to work with them. So obviously miss the people most.
You've just commenced a sizable role as Chair of National Highways. What skills do you think you've learnt as GCCO that takes you into your new role as Chair?
What I've learnt to do, I think I've got better at, is how to understand what the key issues are, how to deal with complicated groups of stakeholders who quite often don't necessarily have the same view on life. And how to nonetheless weave a path through that, and that's a useful chair type skill. Obviously, highways takes me back into the sort of engineering world that I know, and engineering projects, which is sort of where I came from. So hopefully I can add the two of those together to help the executive team in highways make highways the best company that it possibly can be.
My final question. What would be your one piece of advice for someone considering a move into the civil service?
Well, I've never worked harder. The idea that the public sector is full of people who work 9 till 5, dream on. I've never worked hard, but it is fantastically rewarding. But it is much more up and down. Some days are amazing. You do a deal one day that saves £8 billion, and the vendor base is happy with it because it gives them what they're looking for too. And you think, wow, £8 billion. That's 10 teaching hospitals we just paid for. Fantastic. On the other hand, there are days of dealing with a large and complex organization where you wonder if you're drowning in thick treacle. So be aware that you will have days like that. But on the other hand, the good days are amazing.
Gareth, thank you very much for your time. It's been really insightful and maybe cathartic for you. I'm not sure how much time you've had to sort of reflect since you left Cabinet Office, but really lovely to talk with you today.
Oh, great. And thanks for asking me along. I hope it's been useful.
Thank you, Gareth.